we're hearing, what we're feeling and seeing, and being able to contribute to helping our communities, our families across the globe deal with not only the grief of the passing of a loved one, but more specifically, how to celebrate the life of a loved one in the context of this pandemic. Because as I said many times, this is not the first time that people of African ancestry have had to celebrate a loved one when their bodies were denied to them. So we are in a unique position to remember who we are, draw upon who we are, and position our humanity in front. And for me, that means that this is not a new norm. It is our norm. It's an opportunity for us to guide the world based on who we are of African ancestry. This conversation is also aligned with something we call the Mbongi, which means that simply that when something is hurting in the village, and this is a global village, that it's time to sort of stop, sit down, talk about it, think about it, look what's going on, be clear about how we want to move through it. So we're bringing our village together to have those kinds of conversations. We are also placing this in a family conversation as we have these professional Western titles behind us. We belong to the humanity of African ancestry. So this is how our, quote, scholar warriors will discuss this. And also we're looking forward to the wisdom of those who are listening. Everyone else will be muted this time until we go through our brief presentations. And however, if you have questions, please do post them, because we do have a sister, Letitia Cofield, who is tracking and monitoring those conversations. And so she'll gather those questions up. There will be a Q&A time. Also, as we know, anytime Black folks come together for something good, it makes somebody nervous. So now, I'm not trying to get a conspiracy theory, but I do want to talk about the realities, that there's a number of times where these virtual meetings have been interrupted by someone who had no right to be there, and their intention was to disrupt and distract. So again, Sister Letitia will be monitoring that. So please do not feel a need to respond to anything that comes up inappropriate. She has the capacity to respectfully and quickly Zoom them out. Okay? So there will not be any Zoom bombing, if you will. This talk is being recorded, so we can post it again for those who are not able to be here. It is part of a series of how Black professionals have been trying to leverage our knowledge and our experiences for our communities. So you'll be able to hear from many others moving forward. I want to close by also saying this conversation is framed around the idea of Zola, which is a specific type of love. It's a love that is meant to activate us, self-activation in our own healing process. And so we are within ABSI, and we hope that others will join us. We're framing some of these responses around how do we Zola up on one another? How do we love up on one another to hold us physically, spiritually, emotionally at this time? So we do not have to, as we all know, we do not have to know somebody to know they're part of our family. So without further ado, I am so excited to get started and bring in the beautiful wisdom of my family here on the call. First and foremost, I want to open by having Brother Jermaine share with us a little bit about, so where are we? What is this pandemic, and how do we want to frame this conversation from that space in terms of who we are as a cultural people? Let me just share too that Brother Jermaine is not only on faculty at FAMU, but more specifically to this place, he's the co-chair for our rituals committee within ABSI, and he's also, putting back my talking points so I don't lose them all, he is also our student circle advisor, and he's also the chapter president within Florida. So again, my question to you, Brother Jermaine, as you come in, how do you want to frame this pandemic from a cultural perspective and to support our listeners in enjoying this conversation today?
What's up, Mama Ethiopia, and everyone on the call? To all of my elders, I greet you all, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with everyone here about this very important Mbongi specific issue that Mama Ethiopia has been really vibing on, that needs to actually happen. So I want to first thank her for her leadership of our organization, in pulling together countless aspects of our response and mobilizing our people, our professionals, our community in a way that we can respond appropriately to the situation that's around us. More specifically to this question about the context and where are we, for me, even though we know for sure we are dealing with something that only occurs maybe once every 2 or 3 generations, if that. And so we're all going to be impacted by this global pandemic. What does that mean then for us as a people? I think we should be very clear that we have endured countless global crises. And when these come, they impact us and our people differently because of who we are. And so for me, I think the conversation in terms of providing context always starts with this question of worldview. So our elders in ABSI and our elders in the African-centered movement have always, certainly since the 60s, been pushing and advancing this idea of worldview. How do we contextualize where we are in any given moment? Obviously, not in any way to slight this huge moment that we're in with this pandemic. So for me, really quickly, and I'm respectful of the time because I realize we have 10 minutes for our opening comments. But so I basically have just one slide that I want to actually share to help put us in the mindset that I'm thinking we should be in as we look at this. And I'm hopeful that folk can see my screen. If you can, just kind of nod your head. I see you, Mama Ethiopia, nodding your head. Thank you. So this is something that has been circulated probably since the 60s, if not even before, and put together and compiled by various individuals. For me, this came out of Dr. Kobe Kambon's African Psychology book, which is without getting too academic, because this is a regular old conversation, folks. This is nothing more than how we see the world, right? And so as the left side tells us, what's the typical ways in which European Americans or white Americans view the world, and what's the way in which we as African people tend to view the world? And this view of the world is important in terms of how we interpret the things that are going on around us in any given moment. Again, the pandemic is no different, right? So for us, where we find ourselves specifically as we relate to this question about grief and grieving is our ethos, that fundamental character of who we are as a people. This is what this ethos is, right? It is the fundamental character of a people. For us as Black folk, right? Oneness and harmony with nature is critical as our survival of the group. There is less an emphasis for us on control or mastery over what's going on. So you have others who are storming capitals, who are showing up in fatigues and guns, trying to demand to get back to work in real individualistic survival of the fittest mode, where you oftentimes see African people, Black folk, what are we doing? We're looking to harmonize and synergize. And at this point, it's unfortunately to our detriment in many cases, given the way in which this virus is disproportionately impacting us as a people, right? So one could make a reasonable argument, although I would caution if one did make this argument, that our ethos or our tendency may be in some ways putting us in harm's way. I think there's a way we can reinterpret that, and we take events like this, right, that Mama Ethiopia's organized as a way for us to keep our harmony, to help us understand the importance of our group survival. And we can interpret then this situation going on with this pandemic in this context. So context is everything, right? And so out of this fundamental character, like who we be as Black people, right? We be people who are wanting harmony with each other, harmony with nature, and we be people who seek survival of our group, our collective, right? And so then from that, there becomes these different values and customs that we create and that we express. And I'll just point at these two right here in the center: cooperation and collective responsibility, and cooperativeness and interdependence. this Zoom session, and I would argue, whether or not it was Mama Ethiopia's intent or not, and I think it was, is to bring us together as a collective so that we can be equally responsible for each other, to have conversations that help us understand what a moment means. What does it mean that we cannot convene together to do what is so fundamental in our community? Birth and death and all the rituals in between. But the finality, right, of the ritual of burying your loved one, grieving your loved one, because of our nature to be collective and cooperative, right, is difficult for us to grasp what's happening. And so for me and for AB Psi, I think, and for many of us, I'll say in AB Psi, it's a question of how do we contextualize what's happening? And if you give our people context and help us understand what's happening with us, right, that what we're doing, what we're dealing, and how we deal is as old as human beings are, because this is who we are. So we need to understand who we are in the context of worldview, right? And then situate ourselves in the moment in time, which the moment in time we're in now is COVID-19, and our response and our ability to adapt and adjust, to know who we are and make the appropriate adjustments given who we are and what we must do in order to continue to survive. So again, going back to survival of the group. And so lastly, in this third section here, this idea of then what then does does this fundamental character, who we are, and how we pull this character together and express certain values, our cooperation, our interdependence, our spirituality, to actually come out to some sort of behavioral modalities, right? Like, how does all this express? It expresses in our groupness. So not only will you see us in the church, for many of us, or in places where we worship and are sacred to us as we lay to rest the physical bodies of those who we love, you see us gather in these contexts as it's important for us because this groupness, right, it grows out of our ethos, right? This groupness leads us to homegoing ceremonies that are collective within the context of the church, but that's not enough. We oftentimes find ourselves in droves at the actual burial sites. That's not enough. We then find ourselves where we go home and we party and we make sure we let folk know who this person was by showing up at the repast and the places where we gather. This in gathering is so important for us. So then the question becomes, how do we survive? How do we move through and not have that? So it's my job to simply lay the context. And I don't know where I am on time, but I'll just start.
Well, if I may, Brother Jermaine, because
sure.
you're right on point. But so what I also want to clarify and take away from this for our listeners is that these are not an either or, and they're not locating individuals. This is not about somebody who's all white, whatever. It's about ideologies and truths and ethos and beliefs, so we can locate where we are in this. And what it really does for me is reframe. We hear all the time that particularly those of us of African ancestry who's here in the States because of the enslavement period, that we were inundated with having an African nature, African nurture and an American nature. So these are the values and contexts in which we're trying to survive in. So I just want to put that out there. But before we transition, it was something you mentioned in our earlier conversations together. What do you think about this idea of social distancing in the context of what you've just shared in terms of the importance of our gatherings?
Absolutely. So bring me back to where I should end right there. And then a special tribute that'll be less than 30 seconds. I want to make sure I get in. But so out of this context, certainly coming here to this behavioral modalities, the idea for me of social distancing, Mama Ethiopia, and family comes out of, I think, this worldview, which the ethos, of course, is control and mastery and survival of the fittest. But the behavioral expression is this idea of distancing. So how do we as groups respond to the same kind of moment in time? So for us, the idea of social distancing has become important. We latch on to that as a people. We should, because we want to be safe. I ask that we reframe this in a sense of groupness to what I call safe social spacing, right? Where we place what I think social distancing primarily wants us to do is ensure that we are safe. So then rather than emphasize distance, I say, let's switch it and emphasize safety. So safe social spacing then says to us, we can be safe, but we can be social. We can continue our group. So that means we got to be creative. We got to find ways to be safe and to be social and to be connected. And Mama Ethiopia, the AB side talks and the formats have been one way in which we do that. I organize with brothers in the community. So we go to farmland, and though we so used to dapping up each other and loving each other up, we've been meeting the last couple of times and not doing that. But we've been in our space on this land, and we've been coming together and socializing. It's like 4 or 5 of us, and we don't convene in large groups. So we're honoring the safety issue, but we're also honoring the social piece. And so I'm gonna stop there. But I absolutely have to, because yesterday I got a call from a former classmate of mine at Howard. And it's so timely, the way in which things work. She informed me about a passing of one of our loved ones, and many of you may know her, Dr. Alice Galati, a Howard University psychiatrist. She was a stalwart. She, as this ad says, she was DC's gem. But I submit to you all, she was a community gem. She was a gem for us. When I interned at Howard, Dr. Galati would come up to you and just start talking about the importance of medicine and Black folk and the Black community. She was a true gem. And we lost her at the age of 91 to the virus. As strong as she was, all of these years, it was this virus on last Thursday that she succumbed to. So I just want to remember her. I know her family is mourning her. I know this must be very difficult for them. So I just want to show her this respect to this family. So thank you for the time.
Blessings, brother. Thank you so much. So then I want to now invite into our conversation Sister Tawana, who is a member of the National Association of Black Social Workers, who has also been the past chapter president for their Philadelphia chapter, and she's also a co-owner of a funeral parlor. So I wanted to invite her in to kind of share, what are you seeing there? What are the regulations, and what comes up for you when you think about our families, our people?
Thank you so much. And I thank you for hosting this so that we can share with our community. And I will be speaking, of course, as a social worker who is involved in funeral service. And as a family therapist, I am going to share some of what I'm seeing and some of what is missing now in the types of arrangements that we have to do. We are, of course, inundated at this point with family members who have lost their loved ones. And as Brother Jermaine pointed out, even with Dr. Galati, a lot of the deaths that we are seeing in our families are seniors who have been in rehabilitation or nursing homes, and that is just taking away a lot of our legacy and all that we have, all that they have accomplished before us. I would share that one major change in the arrangement conference, even when we get a death call, we then make an appointment to sit down with the family, either in their home or in our office. And of course, now we have restrictions on that so that we are encouraged by the health department and the State Board of Funeral Directors to make arrangements by phone or by email or some kind of electronic connection, or if we do have arrangement in our office, it's limited to 2 people. And as a person who's been involved with families for a very long time, we have always been able to use the arrangement conference as a way to actually bring people together. Many of us know that family can be sticky. And when a major kind of central person dies in a family, things can just hit the wall so quickly. And we've been able in those conferences, the arrangement conferences, to identify where those contentions may be and then to smooth some of them over so that then we can deal with the business at hand and make the person who died the central part of the arrangement conference. We have also seen when our going to cemeteries or crematories, not only do we have the 10 or less and this distancing in our facilities, but at the cemetery, there's a limit, 10 people or less at the cemetery. Those folks can have graveside services. In fact, a lot of the churches now are not able to bring families inside for services, so they are recommending graveside services. And then at the cemeteries, they then limit the number of people who can actually approach the grave. And that then is still under 10 people. That, of course, leaves out so many folks. In fact, today we received a call, a mother died, but she has 9 children. And so we, that cancels out grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so that there's going to be a lot of fallout, as we can expect, and people are having difficulty. We've even had people to let us know that they couldn't call the day that the death occurred. They had to kind of get themselves together. So then we get the call the day after or 2 days after the death. Brother Jermaine had looked at also the fact that like now people can't visit their loved ones in the nursing home or in a hospital, so that they may not have seen that person for days and some months to physically see them. And so they really do want to see that person before the final disposition, whether that's burial or cremation. And so we've been able to accommodate people in that way. We have to unfortunately make sure that every body is embalmed so that we are not exposing folks to anything of danger to them. And then we also have to put in regulations of masking, face masking, gloves, so that as people come into our environment, we are not being infected and they're not being infected. The other thing that happens, unfortunately, is the little children get left out completely. And we've always had a major focus on encouraging families to bring the babies but bring the children so that the death of their loved one becomes real for them, because we know that children are rather concrete in their way of dealing with things. The other thing that has happened is, of course, people are blindsided by this, not expecting that a loved one would die. Resources are limited so that people are really struggling as to what kind of arrangement they want to have. Families have traditions. Some families have cremated for a long time. Other families, not only do they have the service here in Philadelphia, but then they might ship the body down to North Carolina. And none of that can happen now, so that there is a lot that is lacking. Some families have used FaceTime in the viewings that we've been able to arrange for them. And there will be the use of technology will be helpful for that. The other thing that's happening is that they automatically know that they're going to have a gathering at a later time, as soon as everybody's freed up, so that all of them talk about a memorial service of some kind and are starting to really put those arrangements together so that when we're free, they can actually swing into action with their gatherings and their repasts, those meals and parties after.
Right. Thank you so much, Sister Tawana. It's very helpful, because what it's also speaking to is it is further exacerbating the grief that we, quote, typically would experience at such a time. And so I do want to invite Sister Gloria into the conversation to share more about what she's seeing around the issue of how this impacts us in terms of what we feel, think, and spiritually, and even considering our youth. So I'm bringing to the table now Sister Gloria, who is calling in from, I just want to make sure I remember. Sister Gloria, are you in, where are you located again? Please remind
I'm
me.
in
Sorry.
Missouri City, Texas,
Right,
a
and
Houston suburb.
okay, Houston
Yes.
area, and she is a past president for the National Association of Black Social Workers. And so I would love to hear from you again. What are you seeing, and what might be some of your suggestions for trying to cope with what's happening?
Well, I think, first of all, that we have to look beyond our healing and seek to be healthy. It is so important for us to adhere to the COVID-19 safety measures. And I know Brother talked about calling it a different name. It doesn't matter what name we call it, but we must adhere to those safety measures, because we know who's dying more from this disease than any other race, and it's African Americans. History teaches us that challenges to health and safety ignite our fears and our anxieties. And so we must fall back, Sister Jackson, on our African-centered values, our principles, our rituals, and our worldview. Have to remember always that we are the descendants of the slaves who would not die. So we are the survivors of the Middle Passage. We've survived Jim Crow. We've survived Martin and Malcolm, Katrina and Trayvon, and every form of racism and injustice known to man. We have survived, and we will survive COVID-19, but we must build on our strengths. And years ago, a Black sociologist named Robert Hill identified 5 strengths of Black families. He said that we have strong kinship bonds, strong work orientation, adaptability of family roles, high achievement orientation, and of course, religious orientation. You know, those songs got us through Steal Away, Precious Lord. All of those songs helped us to get through that period of slavery. So we are strong, we are skilled, we are talented, we are creative beyond measure, we are spiritual, we are forgiving, and we are loving. And so we cannot expect quick relief from our pain, but we can cry and we can scream. And in so doing, we can also be kind and gentle to ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves if we have relatives who died and we didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. We can visit the grave and have a conversation with them and maybe feel our spirits joining with theirs. We can write them a letter and keep the letter or put it in somewhere where that was special for them. We can do that. And we can honor them by excelling in education, by voting in November. My God, please. We can do those things that we can honor our ancestors. Remember that there are other family members who are also suffering. And we have to think about the pain that they are experiencing. And so we must fall back on prayer. We must meditate. We must read scripture. We must exercise daily and do those things that make us feel good. And we must accept offers of help. Don't hesitate to ask for assistance if you need it. Sometimes we're hesitant because we think other people are having problems and we don't want to ask for assistance when we know we really need it. I was speaking to one of my students. I teach a course in death and dying at Texas Southern University. And one of my students said that she could not do the final paper because she was in so much pain. She was, had found out that she was pregnant, and the father, she dated this guy for about 5 or 6 years, and she found out that he was not interested in being a parent nor in being a husband. And so I had to talk to her to tell her that, and she didn't want to ask her family for help. She said, they're going to talk about me. I said, don't worry about them talking about you. You need their help. They love you and they will support you. So go to them and tell them, yeah, you told me so, but look, I'm in trouble and I need your help and I need you to support me. And believe you me, they will. And she called me several days later and told me that she was so glad that she had that conversation with me. So don't hesitate to ask for help. We are a village, we are a family. And so eventually too, we have to learn to get over it. We cannot get stuck in our pain. There is a time that we can no longer mourn because we have so much work that we need to do. And we can't forget about the children. I counseled children at a delinquent center years ago, and they taught me so much about death and dying. And many of the parents had lost their parent and didn't realize that their child was suffering immeasurably, feeling that it was their fault that their grandparent died. And because the parent was suffering, they just didn't think much about the child. And it was some of the reasons they came into delinquent behavior was because their feelings of guilt and helplessness and hopelessness, and feeling that it was their fault that their grandparent died.
Mhm.
And so years ago, the National Association of Black Social Workers partnered with other entities, including the Department of Health and Human Services and the National Black Child Development Institute. And they developed a workbook, and it came during the Katrina crises. And in that workbook, they developed how to work with children in a crisis. And so I think that we can fall back on the lessons that that workbook taught us, which was to, first of all, inspire hope in our children. Let them know that, first of all, explain to them about COVID and why we're, housed and why they're not at school and with each other. And to let them know that this too shall pass. To be still and really listen to our children. Our children have a lot to say. And sometimes we don't give them the questions to prompt them. How was your day today? And once I told the parents of these children, these delinquent children, that they should ask those questions, and they would find out so much information. Just asking, how was your day today? So we have to support and comfort and love our children and embrace them and make them feel safe. And we have to teach them the 10 Commandments, and if not the 10 Commandments, the 7 principles of Ma'at, which of course are just like the 10 Commandments: truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, and propriety. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, they are just equally as significant and as important. Children have to learn that so that they can establish a foundation early in their lives, so that when trouble comes and you are not there, there's a spirit that they can fall back on, that there's a God in their lives, or you can call that person any other name, a Yahweh, or somebody else that they can call. That spirituality has been instilled in us from the beginning of time. And it is so important that we continue to enforce that with our children.
Thank you so much, Sister Gloria. As I hear you speak, what comes up for me too, as I think about the children, is how do we ask them, not just how they're doing, because I agree with you with that, but also what do they think about the loved one? What are their thoughts coming up? Because if you create a space in an age-appropriate way, the children let you know where they are, then that should guide you in how to respond. Because sometimes, as you said, as adults, we're either overwhelmed with our own grief that we say nothing because we just aren't thinking of it, or we are trying to, quote, protect the children. But our children try to protect us just like we protect them, because they could be holding on to these thoughts and feelings so they don't overwhelm us. Also, sometimes as adults, we may go too fast and give them too much information, right, that they're not ready for. So as we transition to our next presenter, I would just close too by inviting the family to ask the babies, and for me, babies is 0, talking to 35, okay? To ask the babies, honey, what are you hearing? What do you want to know more about? Baba, Uncle Tom just passed away. I don't know how that thing. Woo! Okay, just let it go, family. It just came. Look at it later. Okay. We can ask them what's coming up for them. What are they seeing? What do they want to know? And then more importantly, engage in pleasurable ways to celebrate the life of your loved one with your children. You can draw together. You can, take a whole wall, not drawing on the wall, but a space to hang up all the pictures that you and the family want to do with the children, drawings as well as photos, to bring those back out again, to surround yourselves in the memory of your loved one, to celebrate the loved one until you're able to be with them. So this was really helpful, because now I want us to kind of go into hearing more from our family here around other practical things that we can do to really deal with this grief and celebrate our loved ones in the context of the pandemic. So I am so, so happy to bring into the conversation now, who we refer to lovingly as Mama Mawia, who is a phenomenal healer in spirit and Nana to many of us. And she's calling in from North Carolina. And Mama Mawia, if you would, so what's been your observation when you sort of traveled the globe and got a chance to be with Africans of diverse backgrounds? Because I still think that we are diverse. What do you see in terms of, what similarities do you see around how we think about, deal with, grieve, celebrate death and dying that could be helpful in this conversation? Because I recognize that people are calling in from all over the country as well too.
Thank you, Mama Maria, and Mama. Yo.
No, I can't. I'm not that. Not that. I'm not. I know I'm not that. I'm definitely at your feet. I'm lovingly there.
Great thanks for this opportunity, and it is good to think about our culture. You know, we have, as I was listening to Sister Gloria talk, we kind of sometimes self-isolate. We find ourselves in context in the walls of these Americas without realizing that the blood that runs in our veins is hundreds of thousands of years old. And so therefore the culture is too. And so that we're not as limited as sometimes we may feel. And I, yes, had that experience of traveling around the globe to see how similar many things are. So for example, you know, in terms of celebration, probably the way they do celebrate our passing in New Orleans might be very similar to the way it's celebrated in other parts of the world. So in Africa in particular, the transitioning of a loved one is a tremendous part. Yes, they may have mourners that are specific, but the whole thing is celebration, because they're celebrating the life of someone, not mourning. And that the mourning is only a small part of it, but sometimes the celebrations last for an entire week. And they will wait for the people to come from far and abroad, because that person is so important to the community, as is their passing. So we understand culturally that we come into the world from the ancestors, and that we have this specific journey to live, this destiny, if you will, to fulfill. And when we get properly to our eldership, we need to look back and see that we have completed what it is that we were sent here for, so that we can again joyously join the ancestors. So yes, indeed, it is a time for celebration. So what happens now with COVID? Well, I invite us not to be locked into a place of mourning, but to celebrate as well, to remember, to go back and remember who we are as a people and use that. Yes, some of it is unjust, because the way that our people are not being interred, the way they're not being celebrated, some of it is just really traumatic. You know, when you think of the bodies that are being piled up. And as Sister Tawana says, hers is a unique situation right now where people have the opportunity to interact with a funeral home, because many people do not. So this time I'd like to share with people ways that they can celebrate the way I've seen people celebrate, the way I hope I can go out in, you know, in different ways. So one of the things that I thought about is that you create an altar, and I'll show us how to do that in a minute. But we want to, and I heard somebody talk about, drawing or creating images, etc. That is so important that they at this time can even through arts, through crafts, through just finding something that belonged to that loved one. You can carve an image of that person. And that was done in ancient Kemet being ancient Egypt, for those who don't know, where they carved, many of the statues we see are statues carved to the transitioning of someone. So they honored them through that statue. And so then they had an opening of the mouth ceremony where they poured in food and messages to that person so that they would have them as they transition through time. In the Akan tradition, it takes 40 days before they can become an ancestor. So many people, I would invite you to know that many of your loved ones are still around, still trying to see how you are. And if we can lower the grief some, if we're not afraid, and hopefully we are not, because in our culture, particularly with the older ones, we know that our people still talk to those who have gone beyond. And so maybe that may not be accepted in some places, but silently, we know that that still occurs. Grandma still is there talking to you. And that is because she is still a part of you. She is still a part of your blood. And that gives you strength. So we want to call on them. And this is symbolically a way we can do it. We can have a ceremony where we put in a pot. So maybe you have a cup that belonged to grandma or your auntie or something. That can be symbolically a thing that you set aside, that you can write notes in. So these are just some creative ways. But sometimes we, in African cultures, have an altar to our ancestors. And I'd like to show people now one here that I've set up intentionally for us to be able to see. Can you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. On that altar, and this is a simple one, although I may have decorated it. Typically, we have a bowl with a little water in where we do libations. And what libations is, it's not religious. It's an honoring of those who've gone before. And oftentimes people get concerned about it because they think it is related to religion. But the guys on the corner used to pour a little libation for those who were in prison. So libation is that. I honor you. First, I honor the Creator. I honor all the agents of the Creator. And I honor you, my ancestor, who lived this life so well, I hope. And that I want to make sure that on the other side, you are also, that you are remembered, because I am remembering you. And I honor you, and I ask that you help us be well here. So we have this bowl of water, and we have a little glass that we can pour the libation on. And we have a incense stick. This one is a charcoal incense stick. I often caution people about the sawdust ones because they're not healthy. But charcoal does not get into your lungs, and right now we need to be concerned about that. And here, particularly today, I have a statue of Ma'at, who Sister Gloria mentioned, and a candle. A candle lights the way. This is a white candle in a glass container so that we don't have any accidents. Right here, I have a statue of a man and a woman because we want to keep the masculine and the feminine energy. And so that is just a simple altar that we can put. But also on that altar, we encourage people, we have a celebration in the Akan called Wukadai. Wukadai is a celebration of the ancestors, where we want to let them know that we remember them. It is not worshiping them. We just want them to know we remember them. And so people come with little placards or pictures of their ancestors that we then say, thank you. In the Kemetic tradition, the opening of the mouth was like we do with altars. We put a plate of food. When we eat, we want them to know that we think of them too, so we put a plate of food there to honor that. So most importantly, through all of this, is to remember that there are many ways to continue to celebrate those who've gone before, and to remember that they're not gone. that they are still with us and that we can talk with them. And that when we're in our worst moment, somebody will show up. Grandma will talk to our ear, or we'll miss that accident that was down the road because they stopped us and made us late. Or that we got that parking space because they knew that we needed to get there. We interact with them all the time. And this is not a time to forget that. It is a time to remember that they will always be with us because they flow. Grandma is here in our blood.
Yes.
Great grandmother, grandpa is here in our blood. And the best of who we are is who they are.
Yes.
So remember them, and as long as they live, because we remember them, they will continue to serve us. And so I
Amen.
think of that as a way to keep going.
Yes, yes, amen and ashe. Thank you, Mama Maria, because it actually reminds me too, and we answer that question of, who we are and whose we are, right? So if I remember when I'm in the midst of this pain and this hurt, when I think about my grandmother and what she lived through and how she lived through, then that may help me live through. And sometimes I will say to young people, particularly in my practice, when they are in such dire psychological pain that they can't find a reason to live for themselves, I would say, then let's think about who can you live for? And when they start reflecting on their memories of their loved ones who've gone on before them, in that reflection and storytelling, they begin to find their own strength to get through what's in front of them.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. And so I want to now bring in, initially we had invited Sister Constance Williams to be here with us today. And through no fault of her own, she's having to deal with a situation. She's safe, but she's not able to be here. But everything's in divine order because we've been gifted by my brother deep in the work with me, Donnell Barnett, who's actually the president-elect for the Association of Black Psychologists, and he's also an ordained minister. But more specifically, I want to thank him for taking time to be with us today because he is a Army Reservist officer who's been activated and stationed in New York to serve there. And so I think that he will bring even more wisdom as I pose the questions to him around specifically recognizing that we are diverse people in terms of our religious practices and beliefs, but a good number of us, particularly on this call, may be of Christian faith, and sometimes some of the practices and thoughts like libations and others may not always, quote, line up. So I want to ask you, how did Africans of Christian faith address death and dying before the pandemic, and what do you see its impact on what can be done now? And more specifically, how do we Zola up or love up on one another in the context of being people of African ancestry, but with different practices and beliefs?
Good afternoon, blessings everybody. Before I begin, I want to sort of acknowledge my sister Constance Williams. She did send some comments, and so I just kind of wanted to bring in her contribution that she left for us. And her comments really sort of centered on this idea of testimonies. That, we've sort of always had this, whether you call it oral tradition in the church, sometimes we call it a testimony service. It was an opportunity to listen and hear about some of the struggles we have gone through and how we made it over personally, as a family, as a community. And so this, while we may not have understood it when we were children, as we've gotten older and had our own experiences, we started to really understand the lessons that our ancestors and our elders were trying to tell us about where the strength from which they drew and how they were able to push on and move forward. And so from that is, I think, has a lot of alignment with all that we've talked about, whether it's a explicitly Christian tradition or just a general cultural African tradition. That's something that we have always brought to any space that we've been in. It's sharing our story and empowering one another and giving us little nuggets along the way to how to move forward. I was thinking about I'm wondering if anyone on this call has ever heard the saying where you look at a child and say, that child has been here before. You've heard that before? And it's sort of this I think about those kids who, if it weren't for their age or their size, you would swear you're talking to your mother or your big mama or you're right. Right. And that's sort of this same sort of thing, is that our ancestors were before us, they're with us, and they will be with us moving forward, even in our children, even in our families. That's the essence, the spirit of our people. We're always together, we're always connected. I really dislike this saying that sometimes the world will use, that says, I'm sorry for your loss. When someone or something is lost, it sort of leaves you helpless. You can't really do anything about it. But we've never really believed that way. While someone may be lost, they're never lost. They're always with us. They may not be physically in our presence, but they're never lost from us. And that is how we sort of think about this as a guidepost moving forward. We can't access here in New York. There's a lot of people who are not able to access their loved ones. The state is still even trying to catch up with where all the people are and get them sorted and make sure families are taken care of. It may be quite a while before all of that is sort of reconciled. But while the body may not be with you, you can remember the stories that they told. You can remember the instructions that they gave you, the joke that they like to tell. You can remember the gifts that they left, that in these small ways, the body may be lost, but that person is never lost from us. And that's entirely consistent with how we think about this as Christians and many other faith traditions, that we are all connected. The Bible tells us explicitly that we don't mourn like everybody else mourns. We don't think about death the way everybody else thinks about it. We have a reason to hope. We have a reason to have hope, because we know that our loved ones are always with us. And so I just want to encourage people to think about the life that people lived, as was talked earlier about homegoing ceremonies and things like these are things that we do that we're unable to do, but the spirit of being able to reflect on the good times of our loved ones and the gifts that they gave us, that's something that cannot be taken away from us. That's the how they have imparted will never be able to take away. So I just want to encourage people to think on whatever's good, whatever's pure, whatever's true, whatever it is of good report, to think on those things and think of our loved ones who may not be physically with us, but will always be with us in their character, their life, and their spirit.
Blessings, Brother Donnell. Thank you. As I hear you speak, I'm reminded of another piece to share, is that none of us are perfect. Our loved ones sometimes may have left us at a time when we still had some negative thoughts and feelings about them. We are still holding that as well. So we have to find a way to make peace with that, to forgive them and forgive self if it happens to be a situation where that's needed, because that too can further intensify the grief, the loss, the guilty feelings, and then this pandemic will solidify it further. And you can, quote, literally begin to lose your mind, right? Because your spiritual essence is in turmoil. So free yourself up, and also in the idea that if your loved one has harmed you, I would like to think that it was not done in intention. It may have something to do with about their own spirit not being in the right space and time that they could cause such harm to their loved ones. So I just want to offer that as well as we consider this moving forward. But I want to bring in Brother Anthony, who is calling in with us from, I did have his down here, from Florida as well. Excuse me, no, from North Carolina. My apologies, Brother Anthony. He is the co-chair for the Rituals Committee of the Association of the Black Psychologists. And we've asked him to sort of share some of his ideas about other ways in which we can create new traditions or move our traditions forward and adapt them to the space and times. And it should be things that we can think about across the diaspora in terms of who we are. So Brother Anthony, what do you want to share with the family about ideas?
Hotep family. Well, as I've been listening, and I have the fortunate position of being the last speaker, so all the answers have already been given. We can go home. A lot of what I was going to talk about, people have mentioned. To me, that speaks to the collective genius that we have. Like, we have 142 people on this call, and if we are able to tap into the same energy sources, we can create a reality that will move us where we need to be. So I would like to challenge people to think about some questions, right? Why are we in this particular time right now? What's the purpose of this pandemic? Two, what is it that we believe about ourselves? Brother Jermaine talked about the collective ethos in our community. What is it that we believe? And do we really believe what we say we believe? So if we believe what we say we believe, then we really shouldn't be in a space of sadness. In fact, I think about what this time means in terms of really allowing us to utilize an opportunity to create the life we really want to have as an African people. So what is this going to look like for my children and my grandchildren? This could possibly be a turning point that is going to deal with eliminating those horrendous ravages of this global white supremacy, right? The earth could be changing the energy so that we come into our rightful place and we can just be and stop having to worry about how we're going to survive and just live. Wouldn't that be such a great thing to be able to just live and not have to worry about being pulled over here or this thing happening there, being not given this loan over here, to just be able to live. And so if we think about what we really believe and we apply that, then we can challenge and encourage our loved ones to not be sad, to not be weird. I mean, that's a natural emotion. Yeah, we got to deal with that, but we can't stay in that space. And if we're using our collective genius to focus on how we can push ourselves forward, then we're going to come up with some great things. I also was thinking about, when was the first repass? Who created the idea of a repass? As you look at, and I've traveled around the world, you see cultures have different ways that they deal with honoring the spirit that has passed on. From the pyramids in Kemet all the way to right here in Durham, North Carolina, right? And all over the world, you know, whether it's a Christian tradition, Muslim tradition, we should say Ramadan Mubarak for our Muslim brothers and sisters that are celebrating Ramadan. But wherever we look at how cultures deal with allowing their loved ones to transition, that has evolved. And so this time serves as another evolution point in a number of different ways. We're talking about death and dying today. So we've had at least 30 different solutions that have been given thus far. I lost count at some point, but we could develop 100. We have the capacity and that collective genius to develop a game plan that we could list 100 different ways that people aren't thinking about because they're so accustomed to, I gotta have the repass, I gotta go to the funeral. You know, I had to practically yell at my parents, you can't go to the funeral. You gotta stay home and do it on Zoom because it's just not safe for you, right? It doesn't make sense to go, and then we're now doing 2 more funerals, right? So that's just being real about it. Giving people creative ideas for how they can think about it differently when they haven't thought about it before is something that we are charged to do. And I think that we very well could do that. And we are doing it. We're in the process of doing that, and we can do it even more. So those are questions that I just give people to ponder as we go into this question and answer phase. And maybe people can throw in some other things that we can also add to the collective list. And we can continue just moving forward, challenging us to think critically about why we do what we do, so that we are focused more on living our lives fully 86,400 seconds every single day, and allowing the energy that transfers, because all of us are going to have that transfer of energy from this physical body to spirit. That's everybody's going to have that. So recognizing that, how can we then make that as seamless as possible and tap into the strength of that process rather than the negatives of the process?
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you, family. Just a couple of quick reminders before we do address some of the questions and also hear from our callers as well. This is being recorded, and once the recording is done, we will have it posted on our Facebook page and for the Association of Black Psychologists. I would presume that the National Association of Black Social Workers will do the same, so please feel free to share it broadly and widely. I also want to share a couple of resources, and Letitia, who is our behind the scenes support person, will post these to the family on Facebook as well. I do want to draw your attention to the association, the National Association for Black Social Workers has gifted us a phenomenal resource. They've designed a page that's solely intended for everything Black. There's a number of different resources that are there around various categories. They're even divided by state. So I would like to put a plug in to invite everyone to not only visit and utilize that site, but whatever resources you're thinking of, please send them there too, because this way, as I said, we can find almost everything we need in one space. And a number of the things we've talked about here today, you may find some of those resources there as well. I also want to give a respectful plug for the work of Sister Taraji P. Henson and her foundation, in the sense that she's been able to bring together Black mental health workers where they will be able to provide up to 5 free therapy sessions virtually for those who need it. And so her link will be given to you as well to access, because let me be clear about why I'm offering this. First and foremost, we should do our own community healing. Much of that which we find at dis-ease or troubling us, or what we may even call depression, anxiety, or sadness, anything by any name that feels uncomfortable within us, sometimes can be, quote, healed and addressed in our communities in the way in which we're talking now. So I'll say for me, this is part of my own self-care and healing, to be part of a conversation, to remind myself of who we are and what we do. Yet there may be times that someone needs more than a kitchen table family conversation, or more than a virtual coming together. And so if that's the case, I do want to refer you to Taraji P. Henson's foundation. Many of the members of the Association of Black Psychologists who are licensed are also part of that. So you can actually ask for that specifically. There's also a community, the Emotional Emancipation Circles, which is done by a partnership with the Community Healing Network and the Association of Black Psychologists. We already have up a toolkit that we put together in response to some of the previous traumas impacting our community. We are now revising it for this pandemic, but I would submit to you the toolkit itself is also a resource for you as well. It has some family context and conversations and tools to have to heal as a community, individual, and as a family. And then the last one to bring your attention to as well is, many times we're hearing of the 800 hotline numbers for people in distress. I'm not taking anything away from that. However, if you want your people to be aware of a hotline number where it's actually staffed by many people of color, therefore they may have a more genuine ear for what might be going on, then I would submit that you would access the Steve Fund Crisis text line, and that too is being shared with you in the chat room. But there's a couple of questions that have come up I wanted to sort of bring to the group and see what you guys think of these. I'm trying to scroll up to actually see it happening here. So I believe, So one question that's being asked is, if you can, and maybe this is to you, Sister Tawana, if you can give some ideas about the time length to the rituals. The sister here is saying that when they were going to the parlor for their 90-year-old patriarch of their family, it was a 9-minute service. And there were members of the family who were struggling with the technology and missed the whole funeral, and they're hurting even more now. So what might be some thoughts about that you might have for this family? Because that can feel a bit disrespectful to only have 9 minutes for a funeral and then not having the technology or the support technology to make sure people can actually access it. And I think you're on mute, Sister Tawana.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the question too. There are different states have different requirements, and different funeral homes are operating differently. One of the things that we are able to do longer than that. It's still not the 1-hour viewing and the 1-hour service, but we have been able to have a viewing and have people share their reflections and discuss, and people have brought a picture in addition to the body being present. But one of the things that would be important is for those who are there to make sure that if they can do FaceTime instead of relying on the video that might go bonkers, but rely on maybe more basic kinds of connectors, because the technology is really has not been designed for this kind of thing, and there isn't a lot of expertise in it right now. The other thing that would help, I'm sure, and even for those who missed it, to have those who were there to really take time, whether it's on a conference call but some kind of way where people can hear each other, even if they can't see each other, but they can do Zoom, but to take some time to share with those who missed it what it was like, and also to get them to make their comments and reflections about their loved one. We have to really force connection, and use everything that we have available to us. I think the other thing is to also be sure to have family respect each other's way of mourning. We have to make room for people to do it their way. We know that some people, when a death occurs, they actually leave. I mean, and they isolate themselves because that's the only thing they can do. Others want everybody around them. They want the phone calls. They want the texting and all that. So just identifying or respecting and receiving that people are going to operate differently would be helpful.
Thank you. I have here a message too. I'm going to try to read this to family. It says, as a life cycle celebrant, I want to officiate ceremonies for corporate and civic engagements. What advice do you have for corporate ceremony to honor loss, layoffs, grief during the pandemic, and who would we contact for an organization to sponsor this? And this message is from Sister Smith, Sandra Smith. That's a very interesting way to think of it too, in terms of the grieving and the loss of, and I would also say that's sort of a quality of life, right? Because I think that is what is just as vulnerable for many of our communities, is in particular when they're talking about the disparities, that's what ends up, it can change the quality of life for many of us. So any thoughts from the group around that idea?
I'd like to speak on that. Am I on mute or can you?
You're beautiful, Mama Moy, I can hear you.
I do corporate spiritual places in my consultation. And it's just the same way, because you're talking about diversity there. So there's no one way that works. But if you think of just creating a space, and right now, even a virtual space, even though some people are still going into it, a virtual space where people can come and in their own way celebrate that person. So you're talking about corporate space, you're talking about people on the job, et cetera, things like that. And to honor the same way we were talking about for our family, honor that person's role in your life, to reflect on that role. You know, I might change a word about the situation disrespected, because then that throws people into that loss kind of thing, that I lost the opportunity. I would have them remember that there's still an opportunity. You know, as Sister Tawana talked about, you know, they can still do, but to not see that ceremony that they didn't participate in as the only way to remember and to reclaim the experience with their lost one. But in terms of the corporate, yes, that person, however, or those people, however they spent their lives, or you joined together in that, remember that. And I think it's all about remembering, rather than being stuck as Brother Anthony talked about, in the depression and the pain, to remember the joy.
There's also a number of opportunities that are here as well that may be beneficial for Black folks. I mean, at least it's been my experience that when there's a quote pot of money sitting somewhere, we're the last to hear about it.
Oh, yes.
If we ever hear about it.
If we ever.
So I do want to say that may also be a good resource when you're going into that website that we were talking about that's being hosted by the Black social workers. So please visit that, because there may be some economical opportunities for those who are facing the kind of grief and loss that Sister Sandra was talking about in terms of quality of life. There's also I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to quickly address that question too. I think obviously understanding the person's grieving and the loss of a job, especially if you've been there a long time, that can be traumatic. Obviously, there'll be time to actually grieve that loss. But I think one way to really think about this, especially for a lot of us, is that old, this idea of Kuumba, one of the principles of Kwanzaa, creativity, recognizing that we have that power of creativity to actually, in that forced situation, assuming your income, assuming who you are, your time and all that, which a lot of us got a lot of that now, right? In terms of being home a lot, we can start using our own ingenuity to begin to create things for ourselves. And that might include job opportunities. My 20-year-old daughter, we have moved her into this idea of making masks. So she sews. And so this will be one of her ways this summer of making money, as she plans to do all this other stuff she plans to do once she gets back in the swing of things. So I think we can use this as an opportunity as best we can to really be creative in planning and seeing that thing you wanted to do that you never had time to do because of that job. Now that you don't have it, right?
Yeah.
Is this an opportunity for you to use that ashe, that power that you have, to create something for yourself that could become a business or some source of income for yourself?
Right.
That's a good point.
Right.
Yes, very good point.
There's also been a couple of asks for contact too, so I want to invite the presenters to consider if you can post to Letitia your contact information that can be shared with the callers. We opened this talk up earlier, framing it around this idea of Zola love, and Dr. Wade Nobles, Baba Nobles, is also on the call, and he's gently reminding me, and I want to thank you for that, Baba, that we have posted a paper that he authored around how to conceptualize Zola love and around the 5 tenets of it. And I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to reclaim all of them. I love the idea. It's a 5-star plan. In addition to the paper, he has added a workbook, if you will. It's called While Sheltering in Place workbook. And this too has some guided activities in there that may assist the families as we're contending with this space and time, and also dealing with the loss and grief of our loved ones. And I'm gonna let go of the word loss. Thank you, Brother Donnell. Dealing with the grief and then celebrating the transition of our loved ones. So that will also be a resource that Letitia will post to the community. And they are also on the website I referenced earlier with the Black social workers. Are there any other last minute comments that any of my presenters want to share before we close?
One of the things I would like to share is that as people are going through this pandemic, there really has been a kind of a forcing to the forefront the reality of death. And one of the things that I know we are encouraging families and individuals to do is to really look at resources for final disposition planning. And because a lot of people don't have life insurance or don't have the kinds of assets that can cover final expenses. And there's also just the need to make sure that there is some legacy left for those who are coming behind. So we really encourage people to give thought to it, even if it's not in detail and written down, but at least think and maybe talk with family about, when I die, because we all gonna do it, when I die, this is what I'd like to have happen, to share that.
Thank you for that reminder, Sister Tawana. And Mama Louie, I did hear you when you said, this is how I want to go.
Yes, you did. Yes.
I'd like to speak to that too on another way, that in addition to those really important practical things, I encourage us to reach out. This is a time that we're very much aware of the space between us.
Yeah.
I encourage us to reach out and cut that space. Call, whatever you do, text. I know that millennials are into things that I don't even know about. But, to minimize the space between you and loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're at home now, it's a wonderful time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have on Black Therapy Central a 10-day challenge for people to do activities. So we encourage people to do activities together, things that you may not have thought. Sing, dance, do all kinds of things that bring you together, both in your home with whomever is there. But also, I think we need to talk also about those who are alone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some people who are not with someone at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be a good time to reach out, for someone to reach out to them, whether they be extended family or not, to bring them into an activity that you are doing together and to plan together. We're going to get to the other side of this because that's who we are. And when we get there, we want to have some things in place that will continue.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to get stuck in this space thinking that COVID-19 is the way of our life. We have been resilient people. We have been here for tens and thousands of years, and we will be here for 10,000 more years later, tens of thousands more years. So we need to be planning for our future, not just one-on-one, but what we as a collective will be doing on the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to add also that, our jobs won't take care of us when we're sick and we're down and out, but our family and our friends will. And so let's call them and let's stay in touch. It's so important that we stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you. And again, before we close, I just want to, so thank you, Sister Tawana. I see that you've posted your contact information for Letitia to post. I'm going to ask the other members to do so in the chat room now to Letitia so she can consolidate them and send them out to people as needed. So I want to close how we began, by reminding ourselves in a more intimate way what it means that we're all in this together. It goes far beyond the physical capacity to touch one another. It is a much deeper together. Our ability to lift each other up, named and unnamed, in our thoughts. How are my family doing? And the family is much broader than our, quote, immediate birthed into family. We are a global family. What happens in one part of us hurts the other. We feel the pain. Many of us have had that experience. When we see something on TV, you're vibing with that. Somehow you're feeling that, right?
True.
So please do remember to Zola up on one another, recognizing that our ancestors knew that being well was already in our genetic code. Our wellness is in our DNA. And we have to do this for ourselves, with ourselves. We recognize that most of the basic feelings, like Zola, love, that love is the key to activating a potential wellness. It's an activating energy force. If you are Zoling up and you're doing something in that loving space, and that also includes your own self-care, because in caring for yourself is the best way to care for others, and it's the best protector in this war that we're in to make sure that we are all still here. We must heal the we and not just the me across our generations, across our religious denominations, across our social classes, across all of our differences. Therefore, we should Zola up on one another. And you can always look into the hashtag Zola up we. I'm learning how to do that. It's a whole new world I'm in right now, but thank you for teaching me. So thank you everyone for being here. As I said, we'll post this. We will have more conversations. I want to thank my chapters, my members of ABSI. They have been doing a phenomenal job speaking to the needs of our communities from various places and spaces. We actually have an opportunity coming up on Monday where the Oakland chapter is leading a conversation, an international one, with our brothers and sisters in South Africa in terms of how this pandemic is impacting them there and us here. I think that'd be a wonderful conversation to listen in on and learn from. It is called, I'm trying to find my top here. Thank you, Letitia, for sending it. Here we are. It's from Sister Pat Nunley. Everyone is invited to the celebration of Blackness between South Africa and USA on Monday the 4th from 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, and we have this posted on our website, and we ask that people continue to send things out. Wait, there's one more message coming in, and hold on before we close for sure. Okay, see, Mama Wee is there, thank you. Brother Jermaine is there. Brother Anthony and Brother Donnell. Brother Anthony, did you post yours already too? And we also gave you the name of the group that Mama Wee was speaking to, which is called Black Central Therapy. And I think we're all good here. So Mama Wee, would you be so kind as to close us as well?
Okay. So in honor of how we came here, through the source that we all understand is universal, and through the very ones that we speak of today, our ancestors, we remember, we tie back to them and the memories of our rituals, the memories of our families, the memories of our friends, and understand that that strength and the belief in self, as we join together, we understand that we will move forward together and we will win.
Amen and Ashe.
Amen.
Ashe.
Amen.
Blessings,
Thank
family. Woo!
Son, nah.
Yes, Zola up, everyone.
Yes, we shall. Thank you so
Ashe,
much.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good to see all the faces, yay.
Well done. Well done. Great.
Thank you. Woo! Yay, we did it.
Thank you.
Great meeting.
Successful project, Theo.
Thank you, thank you. We can do
Beautiful.
more of these. The family is great. We should ask, Letitia, if we can put on the Facebook to ask people to send us topics that they'd like to see us speak to, then we can try to organize that as well too.
Definitely will do.
And maybe the presenters can stay on as our family goes out, just to kind of Zola up on one another as well. And Letitia, you can go ahead and stop the recording, please.
Say that one more time.
If you can stop the recording now, please.